Have you gone back home since you've been here?
Yeah.
Oh,
Last time
several
was
times.
actually January
January.
this year.
Okay. So you see your parents and your siblings
Yes.
once a year at least.
I try to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Still a lot. It takes a lot. There's a lot of courage
That is
there,
a lot.
and yet I think there's like a sense of adventure. I think that you have to be willing to say like I'm gonna like leave the things I know, the place, the family, like the jobs you care about, and say like I'm gonna explore like and find out like what this life has for me too. Like that's
what would, so you say a sense of adventure, right? Is what would we call the sense? I don't know. It could be a sense of adventure. It could be something else. But what do we call this sense? That it sounds like to me that the experience, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the experience that you've had since you were a child is you were always different and you were always going against the grain, right? And whether that be by choice,
right,
or whether that be forced upon you, not by choice at all, right? But you even talk about, you go to Spain and even you're a different color, you speak a different language, you look different, you're a different gender than a lot of what's in engineering. You're female, right?
Right.
And then you go into the fact that you're younger than everybody, right? And so it feels like to me that your entire life you've been going against the grain, and it hasn't stopped you. And it hasn't, like, from my perspective, it hasn't stopped you and it hasn't slowed you down. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, it hasn't been easy every day. Part of it is like I usually love what I do, and like the steps that I take makes me happy. But at the same time, sticking out all the time is kind of a burden. And there is some days I wish I was like normal, and like some of my closest friends know I say that, sorry, all the time. Well, often, that sometimes I wish I was just normal. But
What do you mean by just normal?
like having a more classic life, like I'm 31 now, and maybe I will change country again. Like I don't even know. Like people at 31 are probably like thinking about like, yeah, setting up, like having their house, like kids, whatever. And I'm like, well, maybe I should go to Australia before I'm 40. You know what I mean?
I love that.
And so sometimes I'm like, you have that. So my life is fun, but at the same time, sometimes I'm like, am I actually missing out on something I should be doing that I'm not doing? But then you have like that God side where
Right.
you like, well, if God wanted me to be normal, put the quotes on normal,
Right.
whatever normal means, it would have made me in a different setup. Like I said, that like coming here was definitely a God's move more than a me move.
Right.
And there is something about fighting yourself is actually harder than trying to fit.
Wow.
And so you're just like, but then it hurts you more to try to fit, than to fight yourself.
Right.
And so you are in between, like, okay, do I just stop and like I follow everyone, but then you're unhappy, so you go with what makes you better, like what you feel like God puts in your heart, but then you're like, yeah, but then I'm sticking out more. Should I keep doing that? It's like
the word that I would substitute for some of this when we're saying normal in this context, I think would a different word or be typical?
Yeah, usual.
Right.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like it's just easier to be typical.
Yeah.
But and there's a habit, but at its core, like the people that are typical, what do they want? Like at their core, I guess the person that's typical.
I mean,
they're looking for something that is exceptional.
Right. I think what's crazy is that, like, to be clear, I don't regret my life by any means, but I think that up until a couple of years ago, a lot of people have said I had a very normal or typical, or I would actually call it expected life.
Expected is a good word.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where I went to high school, I went to college, I graduated, I got a job, I got married, right? Spent a couple of years married, working a day job, had kids. So like I followed a path that I feel like is a typical or a very expected path, right? And
For you, in the way that you were raised and your demographic,
my experience, you know, all of that. And I think what's crazy is that, like, sure, I got married very young. I got married at 21.
Okay.
So we're the same age, and this year I've been married for 10 years. So it's a big difference there,
Definitely.
right? But I think that even at the 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, like that age range where you were moving countries from where you grew up to Spain to then to the US, like Brooke and I would have done anything to be able to do that. To just go out to the world and, like, obviously you're working, like you're doing everything you have to do, but from, like, I remember my perspective 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, like we both grew up and born and raised in North Carolina, and us moving to Pittsburgh was because we wanted to get out and explore, right? But if we had had the option to go overseas, to go do something that was like wild, like it was way out of expectations, it was not typical, right? Like we would have done it in a heartbeat because that was what we thought we would have wanted, we would have liked.
Yeah.
And you're living that life and going, hey, wait a second. What if I should have settled down somewhere and, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I feel like it's one of these things where it's like, is the grass greener on the other side? Like, but God also has a plan. And I think I'm in a place, you're in a place, and it's because we're supposed to be there.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's so hard to not, like, what's the quote about comparison being like the thief of joy?
Exactly absolutely.
You know, right?
You're always comparing your worst against someone else's best.
Yeah, that's so true.
Or our normal against somebody else's best. And like, it's like, but again, this kind of gets us to, like, kind of this idea and this topic of, like, I think comparison is a part of it, but like of like the seasons of our lives and how do we deal with that healthily? And I think a lot of times whenever we're not doing that, we're looking at somebody else that is having a different experience or in a different season or X, Y, Z. And we're saying, well, I kind of want to be in that season now too.